What I Just Done Read.
Welcome back to What I Just Done Read. My name is Max, this is my Bohemian Book Corner, and this is a book review show that likes to give an equal voice to all books, not just those that are appearing either on the bestsellers list or on the new releases list. I have my own list, as it happens. This here is, I've actually got a bookmark for it, thing. Anyway, so this is my list of books that I've compiled over the years that I should really read and then never got around to doing so. So here we go, I made a list out of them, and doing this as a way of shoehorning my ass into reading more and then telling you about them and telling you what I think of them and whether or not I think that you should check them out yourselves. For today, we are over here somewhere on the list. I can't actually see what I'm looking for. There we go. So we are going to be looking at Tales of Mystery and the Supernatural, Gothic short stories edited by David Blair. Before we do that, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody who's been checking out the channel recently. By the time this goes out, I think we will have just tipped over our first 1k subscribers. So thank you everyone. We wouldn't be here without you. So thanks, and do obviously come back and check out what we're doing and check out often. And also, if you like, check out our website as well. The Xadrum channel is part of the Xadrum, my small business that I started in 2016 to release and re-release the works of 3 generations of writer within my family, myself, my father and my grandfather as well. There will be a link in the description below. Check it out, see what you think, and maybe show us how much you care with your cash. Or not. I don't know. Anyway, so sorry, before we go any further, we are going to be looking at our word of the day. This one is actually from this, and it's a nice simple one, and it is Gowk. G-O-W-K, Gowk, which literally is another term for a cuckoo. But, and I can actually read it from the page here. Where is it? 214, isn't it? There we go. Gowk. Literally cuckoo, a Northern English and Scottish colloquial word for a fool. There you go. So, if you have your protagonist from the north of England needing to put somebody in their place, then there you go. As always, take that, make it your own, use it in your own writings, and you're welcome. From them, not from me. I'm just translating and reiterating, and whatever. I'm going to shut up. So, what we got? Yes, tea. We have lychee and jasmine. I can highly recommend it. If you are in Norwich, go to the little tea stall on the market, and you'll find it there. So, today's book. As I said, Gothic short stories, edited by David Blair, who I believe is a professor of English at the University of Kent at Canterbury, and was a gift from my good friend Simon Morgan. Thank you, Simon. It's rather good, to say the least. What I'm going to do with this one is a little bit different to what I normally do. So I'm going to talk about the product first, because there's some wonderful things in here before I go on to the stories themselves. I believe there's a total of 20 stories in here, with some really nice notes on each of the stories at the end here, as well as a general introduction, a foreword, and then an introduction as well, which is quite involved. So that's why we're going to have a look at this first. I really love this edition. There's some really nice things going on here. What I really liked is like this really nice kind of the embossment that you've got here with the skull and with the blood is really nice. And what I like about that is that it's just that. It's quite subtle, almost as a mainstay of the Gothic genre itself. It's almost sublime, like just having these little bits here. And again, the image itself is quite nice. What is it from? Omni Vanitas, Dutch School, 18th century, apparently. I must say, I think the only downside about this particular book, I would say, is that the blurb on the back, very small black writing on a grey background. That's about the only thing, but otherwise it is really nice. So, just to give you a touch of the blurb as it is, I'm going to have to turn it this way so I can see the bloody thing. Late in the 18th century, authors began to write Gothic stories as a way of putting literature back in touch with the irrational, the supernatural, and the bizarre, which had been neglected in the Age of Reason. The superb new collection brings together stories from the earliest decades of Gothic writing, with later 19th and early 20th century tales from the period in which Gothic diversified into the familiar forms of the ghost and horror story. Work by writers such as Poe, Dickens, Hawthorne, Gaskell, M.R. James appears alongside lesser-known authors from the period from both the US and the UK. Some of these stories are lost masterpieces, and several have never been anthologized before. Together, they cover the spectrum of Gothic storytelling, tales of madness and violence, of shapeshifters and spectres that express some of the deepest fears of the human mind. Insanity, sexuality, death, and the often terrible power of the past to catch up with the present. And then I suppose the only other downside about it is that it's a paperback. Something like this, considering what else I've got to say about the book, it's a shame it's not in hardback. That would have been lush. So obviously this seems to be an appropriate one to do on what's probably going to be our spooky season episode. Can you tell? There'll be a complete list of all of the stories that are included in this anthology here. What I do love about it, beyond just the aesthetics of that, is I love the fact that the editor has opted to present the stories chronologically, with the earliest being 1773, Sir Bertrand Fragment by Anna Letitia Aitken, right the way through to the also ever great E.F. Benson, The Room in the Tower from 1912. That really adds to it, not just because you can see the evolution of Gothic as a genre throughout predominantly the 19th century, but also because from a grammatical point of view as well, you can see the changes in style and trends of writing itself. I mean, you go from things like, let me find an example. Yeah. So there you go, page 13. That entire page is one paragraph. And it doesn't even start there. That's one paragraph. It finishes there. You see, and so that was from 1773. But so you get through to more contemporary stuff. So that's from Sheridan Le Fanu's wonderful work Shark and the Painter, which is from like the 1830s. So you can see those different styles and that, which I find quite fascinating. So for those of you who don't know anything about Gothic as a literary genre, as opposed to in my review of the nature of Gothic, which is more about Gothic architecture, Gothic itself as a literary genre started in 1764 with the publication of The Castle of Otranto by Horace Walpole. It was then very quickly picked up by other writers, and most notably would be Anne Radcliffe with her work, which very much worked in a similar model, The Mysteries of Adelpho. I'm not sure I've said that quite right, but it's close enough. I'm sure somebody will correct me if I'm wrong. And then really kind of gained more ground towards the close of the 18th century and then into the dawn of the 19th. Very much in the early days, it was still kind of seen as gutter literature, appearing a lot in what they called, I can't remember, it's either yellow books or blue books, one of the two, which were like penny publications for the masses. But again, as it says on the back there, it eventually developed into a genre in its own right and attracted some of the finest and most creative minds within the literary world, both here in the UK and on the other side of the pond as well, and very much as well in Europe as well. Let's not discount the works of European writers. I mean, the first one that always pops to my mind is the wonderful German writer E.T.A. Hoffmann, who most people will probably know because of The Nutcracker, but his works of fantastical literature and Gothic literature are masterpieces as well. If you've ever read The Sandman, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And that's what's really nice about this. I mean, there will be a number of these stories that I'm not going to touch on too much, and there'll be a list of those here, mostly because they are very well known, and I'm sure other people with letters after their names have probably studied more and gone more in depth with them than I need to. What I will say again, last thing I was going to say about the publication itself, what I really like is they take the time, both in the general introduction and then again immediately after it in the foreword, to recommend that as a reader you do what I generally tend to do anyway, and that is read the book first and then read the introduction, so you can save yourself spoilers. And the introduction, again, is very, very good, it's very in-depth, and again, it's another reason why I love Gothic fiction, is the use of metaphor, which allows you as a reader to engage with the work on more than one level. The introduction itself goes very much into the subtext of a lot of these stories and what they were about and how they would have been commentaries on current affairs of the day. But that's what's so nice about Gothic. You can scratch beneath the veneer and see what that social commentary was, or you can just enjoy them because it's a good ghost story. So I think a lot of modern writers, especially Hollywood writers, should take note. Let's put that to one side for the minute. Let's go to my notebook. So there's a few of the stories that I wanted to pick out that I really enjoyed. Ones that you may not have heard of, because they're mostly the ones that I hadn't heard of. A couple of them I had. And we'll start with the early ones. The first two stories that are in the collection, which is the fragment Sir Bertrand, which is written as a fragment, and also another one that was written in 1801 called The Captive of the Bandetti. These very much typify those early Gothic works, where, like the Castle of Otranto, it is a story set about something that happened long ago. They are very much set in a medieval period that may or may not have existed. They also carry that element about them of, this is a story that I am telling you that I have discovered somewhere, whether it's a found diary or somebody told me this over long nights in the bar or something like that. They've all got that element in them, and these do as well. Yeah, so both of these early tales, they do they're almost overflowing with a lot of those early tropes of Gothic. In particular, very oppressive environments. They feature ruins or certain elements that are perceived from the point of view of the narrator as being monstrous in their dimensions, in the same way, again, aping the monstrous fist and the monstrous helmet that appear in the Castle of Otranto. They also, as well, very much feature threats that are perceived as supernatural. In some cases they are, in some cases they aren't. And also the other mainstay of early Gothic, and I suppose it is still a mainstay of horror as a genre in general, and that's women in peril. What I found really interesting about these two tales as well is they both feature brave knights riding out lustily to do some grand deeds. And as a role player, it did very much put me in mind of the early forays as a child playing D&D and similar kind of games. They feel almost like a proto version of an adventure that you could run for your friends, which was fantastic. And again, it just gave me a whole new insight into that kind of part of role playing as a pastime. Unlike the book, I must admit, I'm not going to go through these in order of how they appeared. It's just because of the way that I've done my notes. There are two in particular that I did really enjoy, so I'm going to keep those for the end. So the next one I want to have a look at is one of the more well-known stories, and that's the Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, which was published in 1892. I have read this one before, and I wasn't originally going to say anything about it, because I remember, I think I read it I think it appears in one of my handbooks of horror stories. I think that's where I first read it. But it is quite ubiquitous. It does turn up quite a lot in anthologies. This time I kind of saw something different in it. It's weird. Again, sometimes that happens. One of the things I really like about it is that it's written totally in the present tense. It does add to the immediacy of the supernatural element of the story. Again, written as a bit like a stream of consciousness tale. It really works. It builds up the tension really, really well. But what I noticed about it this time, and maybe consider a bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to listen to this bit, please go to the timecode below. But what I do really like about it is that, coming back to this idea of metaphor, you can read on it on two levels. Is it just this young woman who's staying out in the country, really seeing things in the Yellow Wallpaper, or is the story simply a tale of slightly more mundane origin, and this young woman is simply being gaslighted by her eminently brilliant husband, who's also her physician? What I found most curious about that is actually when you read the notes at the back, this story Perkins wrote kind of based on real experiences of a previous marriage of hers. Obviously, her experience doesn't go as far as it does in the story, but that was interesting to know that element of it was very much on purpose. The other thing I really liked about the story, which again I hadn't picked up before, is you're almost half all the way through the story before you realise that this story is set in the States. Everything about it prior to that feels like it's being set in rural England, and it's only the occasional phrase and turn of phrase, like the reference to fall instead of autumn and things like this, that make you suddenly realise, shit, no, this is American Gothic, not British Gothic, which is wonderful because it's so subtle and again so wonderful of the Gothic genre. It just adds that element of sublime and that element of discombobulation, where what you believe to be true suddenly isn't. And just having that worked in there quite subtly is wonderful. It's Charlotte, well done. Thank you. Talking of sort of stream of consciousness ones, one of the stories that it's not that I didn't enjoy it. The death of Halpin Frayser, which again is another American Gothic one, and it's very good. but that's the only one of the ones I think in here that I wasn't overly sold on. And it wasn't that the story isn't any good, it's just that the author has a tendency to overuse quotes from more famous writers, including but not limited to Shakespeare, Wordsworth, Coleridge, and several others. He just throws in quotes from these people's works to highlight a point or to stress a feeling. And that's fine, but I just felt that it does a disservice to his own writing, if you know what I mean. We've got a few more to have a look at, so very quickly, the other one that I wanted to talk about, and I suppose it is the other more well-known story, is The Bodysnatcher by Stevenson. Robert Louis Stevenson, that's his name. Which was written later on, I think it was in the 1860s, and was very much based on the events from 1829, 1830, of the case of Burke and Hare, and creates a fiction around those events. The story itself is the sequel of his fictional narrative of somebody who was, at the time, receiving the bodies that Burke and Hare were bringing to the medical school at Edinburgh University. That one I really liked, not only because it's a good story, but also because on a quiet night at work I had time to actually go back and look up some of the factual stuff about Burke and Hare, which is particularly horrible. If you've never looked at it, there is a really good article on it on Wikipedia of all places, so do go and have a look, because it's quite terrible. I'm surprised they got away with it for as long as they did. So an honourable mention for The Lame Priest, which in the anthology itself is credited to S. Carlton, although when it first appeared in 1901, it appeared anonymously. And it's literary historians since then who have kind of looked at the style of the writing and said, actually, it's probably her. What I liked about this one, I mean, it's a bit difficult because the writing style is a bit dense and it takes a bit of time to get into. The thing that I liked the most about it isn't actually anything to do with the story itself. It's just, from reading it, I kind of went, I wonder if this was in part the inspiration for a very good 80s horror film. It does make me wonder. I mean, what do you think, Father? So now we come to the last two stories that I really want to touch on, and these were my two favourites from this collection, specifically from the authors that I'd never heard of. The first one is from 1818, extracts from Goschen's Diary number 1. This is beautiful. Again, it's as something that's still very much in those early years of Gothic. It has wonderful Gothic elements in it, but it's also a bit of a break from the earlier stories in the genre. Essentially what it's about, it is about a priest, Father Gosschen, who is called in to hear the last confession and to give the last rites to a condemned man. And what follows is a wonderfully lurid soliloquy of the events that led up to this man awaiting his execution. It is full of this wonderfully theatrical language, and it's delivered by the condemned man with such vehemence and passion that it's the kind of thing that it really should be on stage. And even though the story isn't that long, it's the kind of thing that you could do a wonderful audio story for. I mean, it's over 200 years old. It's probably out of copyright. So any of my friends out there in the audio story world, if you want something else and something a bit different to do, check out extracts from Goschen's Diary number 1. It's well worth it. The one story, though, out of the lot that was head and shoulders the winner for me in terms of discovering new writers as well as new material and new stories. So to give it its title in French is Numéro 250, Rue Le Prince. Not surprisingly, this is a story set in Paris. It was written in 1895 by Ralph Adams Cram. He was an American author who obviously decided that he wanted to reach out beyond his side of the pond and set his story in the old world, as it were. What I find interesting about this story in particular is that Cram himself was an architectural historian, having specialised particularly in European architecture, American architecture, and Japanese architecture as well. And that's one of the wonderful things about this story, is that he takes his knowledge and applies it just to the location of where the story is set. This monstrous edifice that is hidden in the back streets of late 19th century Paris. It's wonderful. Everything about it appeals so much to late Victorian Gothic aesthetic. It's brilliant. I don't want to say too much about it because I wouldn't want to ruin it for people. This is a good example of what I was alluding to at the start about the subtext of current affairs that occurs in Gothic fiction, where the threat of aggressive female sexuality, which was a fear and a concern in late Victorian society, is very much in evidence here. But again, as I said, because it's a good story, you can choose to read into that if you like, or you can just choose to enjoy it as a horror story, as a ghost story. And again, because of Cram's profession, those very fears literally are in the bricks and mortar of this house where the action takes place. It's fantastic. It's so good, in fact, that I went and had a look. And again, from the notes at the back here, it does mention that his only collection of Gothic stories and fantastical literature, Black Spirits and White, was published in the States in 1895 and then a year later in London, and had never been republished since. So, being slightly bloody-minded, I went, ooh, how much can I get a first edition for? Yeah, about £680. Actually. But since this was published in 2002, the collection has been re-released, so I have added it onto my list to look at in future because I enjoyed it that much. They're the stories that I wanted to talk about, really. I am going to very quickly disappear and do my eyes, because we all like eyes, and we all like a jar of eyes, which is so much better than a jar of pickled buns. And we are back. Woohoo! I have my eye ratings. So before we come to that, of course, we will just ask the most important question. Do I recommend this book? Yes, absolutely 100%. Whether you are a complete novice to Gothic as a genre, or an old hand reading this from your dusty tomb as you deliquesce as a lich, maybe? Who knows? Then yeah, do check it out. It's wonderfully put together. As I said at the start, the fact that they run through everything in order so you can see that evolution of Gothic is really nice. But certainly I think if you've never read Gothic before and you're looking for an introduction to it, you can do far worse than that, because there are a nice mix of the obscure and also the well-known as well. So, looking at our eye ratings, not surprisingly, for content it gets the big 5i, and for the reasons I cited, for the product itself, I'm going to give it a 4i, simply because, one, it's not a hardback, and also because of the back cover. Damn you. But yes, give it a look. It is well worth your time. That can go on the shelf, and we will turn to what we are going to look at next, which, if you have been following the show, I am going to say expect the next one to be quite a long one, because we are going to be looking at, even by today's standards, it's still very much underrated, William Hope Hodgson, and we're going to be looking at his other great work of fantastical literature, not The House on the Borderland, but The Nightland. That's going to be coming up next. I have read parts of this before, so hopefully I can kind of read through those pretty quickly. But do now go and enjoy whatever it is that you happen to be reading at the moment. Please feel free to let me know in the comments below what it is you're reading and what you think about it. Always interested to hear from our viewers. And until next time, get thee gone. From British and Americans. Sorry, it is really difficult to read. I should have a fucking torch here. And many lesser known Northers. I think that's not Northers. Let's try again.